So I think we're about ready to get started. Just a reminder that these classes are recorded, and along with receiving a recording of this video at the end of our session today, the video is also available publicly on our YouTube channel. So you can always log on and take a look at this class along with any other class you might need.
Yeah.
So for this morning's class, number 4A, this is titled Module Setup Extra Duty Billing. So this is part one of a two-part class. In this first part, we're going to learn how to set up the actual module. There isn't that many steps involved, but it is an important first step to take before you can really use this to create extra duty jobs, to invoice them, to report on them. Now that class actually takes place tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. So there is the second part to extra duty at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm signed up for that one too. Thanks.
Okay. Wonderful. So I think we can get started. Let's show my desktop application. And you may have extra duty billing available as a drop-down menu along with all of your other options up top. Otherwise, you're going to have a icon just like the one I have highlighted here, extra duty billing. So you can access the module two different ways, either within the desktop application or you can have its own icon, its own application. They will both bring you to the same screen, which is what we're seeing here.
Okay.
And this is our extra duty billing module. This is what allows us to create the jobs, assign the jobs, invoice them, and report on them. Today, though, we're going to focus on setting up the module, which means we're going to learn how to set up administrative fees. We're going to learn how to create vendor profiles. So anyone that you do work for will have a profile, so we'll learn how to create those, along with other important items necessary to use this module.
Okay, real quick, can I just tell you on the way we do police outside service, I don't have an administrative charge per se. The vendor or the customer gets charged a flat hourly rate.
That's perfectly fine.
What you're going to tell me as far as setting it up?
Yes, that is absolutely the case. I'm going to show you how to create administrative fees anyway, only because this class is being recorded and can be used as a reference by really anyone else. So those attending this class live or in the recorded session may need to know how to create those. So we'll still take a look at it, but if it doesn't apply to you, you can certainly discard that part of it.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to be working primarily under the Setup drop-down menu, and we're going to take a look at not necessarily every screen within this drop-down menu, but we're going to start from the very top. And that first screen is called Update Department Profile.
Okay.
So this is a collection of global settings, system-wide settings that the application will use. And within this screen, we want to make sure that you have your department name, address, city, state, zip, and phone number. And that's going to be used for header information on some of your reports. So it's always a good idea to enter that in there. And more importantly, you're going to use the screen to enter the remit to address. Now, the remit to address is going to be used on any invoices you generate through the system. So if you plan on creating invoices and sending it to your vendors, this is going to be the address for which they have to submit payment to, which is why for mine, I have the company or department name, the attention extra duty department, or whoever it is that payment should be submitted to. And then, of course, you have your address and phone number. So this is all information that would be put into any invoices that you generate directly through the extra duty billing module.
Got it.
Now, under the coordinator email, you can enter the email address for someone who oversees or is responsible for the creation and assigning of extra duty jobs. So for you, that might be, let's say, like an officer, sergeant, lieutenant, somebody who's responsible for scheduling this work. And the reason why we might use this coordinator email is because they might not always be the ones who are creating the jobs. They might be responsible for overseeing it, but they might have other people entering the jobs at any given time. So what this does is this sends that person an email every time someone creates or assigns work. Now, you will have the opportunity to define anyone within the police department or even within the municipality as a coordinator for even a specific vendor. So if there's just certain types of jobs that you do where there's one person who's responsible for all of that work, you can actually set that person up as a coordinator and just notify them when those particular jobs are created or assigned. So the coordinator emails are really nothing more than notifications. You don't need to use that, or you can always come back at a later time and set a coordinator email. But certainly I would recommend entering a remit to address, very important, for invoicing.
Yes, for us, that would definitely be the finance department. Can the coordinator email be more than one?
It cannot. So what would have to happen in a situation like that is you would have to create a group email, and you probably have group emails already set up for other things, either within the police department or even within the municipality. And so you can create a group email called extra duty at whatever.com. Right, that's your department. And then you can link multiple people within your organization to that email address. So we're just going to send one email out, but there might be 4 or 5 recipients within your organization.
Sure, okay.
Okay. Now, we're not going to click on the Save button just yet. We're going to click on Application Control Next. And here, you just want to make sure that your date ranges are correct. And so this should be your calendar year, which is probably what you set in the main scheduling application.
Yes.
Okay. Now, we're going to skip over to job number and invoice number. Now, just a little background. Our system, every time you create an extra duty job, there is a job number assigned to it. Now, that job number can be for a single day's worth of work, or it can be for an ongoing job, right? It could be a mall detail or just something that you guys do frequently. So what this allows you to do is to set a job number based on what you already have, let's say, on paper. So for some folks, that might be like a number that looks like this, 2016-0001. And so the next job would be 2016-0002. Now, you do not have to set a job number, in which case our system will just use A1. Okay? If the last job number you had in your current system was 350, you can use that number, and then the next time you create a job through our module, it will set it at 351. Okay. Same applies for invoice numbers. So really, this is just a matter of maintaining continuity with the job numbers or the invoice numbers. If that's not terribly important to you, then I would just enter A0, and then the next time Extra Duty creates an invoice for one of your vendors, it will just call that invoice 1.
Will it accept the year followed by decimal point 0.01, so it then continues 0.02, 0.03? Do you know if the logic will hold true for that?
For the decimal point, I can't be entirely sure. We typically suggest doing just a straight up, numerical value. So right. 2016-001 would certainly work. No doubt about that.
Okay.
Okay. At the very bottom, there's a category labeled traffic safety. Not necessarily used by every single department out there, but what it does is it allows you to notify a group when an extra duty job is required. And we call that traffic safety because sometimes if we're going to do a road job and there's going to be a road closure or something where a new traffic plan has to be created, we might need to notify someone of that fact. And so that person might be responsible for coming up with the, traffic plan. If there is a closure, where is the, detours going to be maintained. And so that's just a way of keeping that group just sort of informed of the fact that there's an extra duty job and they might have to do something. You do not have to use that option, but it is there. Again, it only allows you to set up one email address. So if you plan on using this feature and you have multiple people involved, you may want to just use a group email address to notify everyone. And if you do plan on using a traffic safety notification, you can make that available for all extra duty jobs. So regardless of what type of job you're creating, you can set it as a default that we always must notify the traffic safety people in order for them to review the job and, acknowledge the fact that they might have some work to do. Once again, we're not going to click on the Save button. We're just going to go right to Invoice Options. And so up top, you have the ability to apply a custom header to any invoices that you generate from the system. And so you can just find your department's insignia. That will put it right onto the invoice and just makes for a more professional looking invoice. And so just use the Browse button to browse through your computer. And as long as the image file fits this profile here, width, height, and resolution specifications, then the logo should look quite nice on any invoices that you generate. Okay. Next, you're going to choose from an invoice profile. There's only 2 available, and they're actually quite similar. The only difference is that in Profile 1, your invoice is going to display the work date, the location, and the employee or officer that worked on that day. Whereas Profile 2 will omit the names of the officers working the jobs. I'll stick with Profile 1, and now we can click on the Save button. And we're ready to move on to the next setup screen, which is called Update Payment Terms. So a payment term is simply how long the vendor has to pay their invoice. This screen allows you to create multiple payment terms because different vendors might have different terms. A private company might have a little less time than, let's say, a school district. So you're going to use this screen to create as many possible payment terms as you might need. Now, I have an example here, which is a 15-day payment term. This is what would appear on the invoice. It's labeled 15 days, and under days to add, we just enter the amount of days, 15 in this case. So the value of setting a payment term is that if we need to run reports or track old invoices, old unpaid invoices, it will tell us how old they are based on these payment terms. To create a new one, click on the New button, enter the description, and then enter the amount of days to add, and click OK. So one of the last things we're going to do this morning is learn how to set up vendor profiles. And as you're setting up those vendor profiles, you're going to learn how to assign each one of them a payment term where applicable. Okay. Let's exit out of our payment terms. And next, we're going to take a look at update administration fees. Now, an admin fee is something that is tacked on to the hourly charge rate that a vendor already has. Now, you can certainly choose to just charge your vendors a flat amount that includes everything. That's perfectly fine, in which case you can skip this step. But for those that will be applying admin fees to each job, the way it works is an admin fee will have a description, an amount, which could either be a dollar figure or a percentage, depending on how you choose to apply that admin fee. And then under charge type, you're going to choose how that admin fee gets applied. Does it get applied to each working hour, each day? And there's a few options available under this drop-down menu that should fit just about everyone else's needs. Now, I will make a case for admin fees, even if you don't currently use them, and that is that, number one, an admin fee can be reported on. So if you wanted to know how much money you took in on administrative fees, you would be able to do that. And that might be important with things like vehicles, right? If I'm using department vehicles for these jobs and there's this wear and tear that's being added to it, it might help to know that we have taken in a certain amount of revenue in vehicle fees, and that can be used to service vehicles, to do things of that nature. So not only can you report on it, but it might open up just several possibilities into what you're going to do with that information, what you're going to do with that revenue that's coming in. So speaking of vehicle fees, let's go ahead and put one in. Let's click on the New button. We'll enter the name as it will appear on any invoices that you generate. You're going to enter the amount for the vehicle fee. And under the charge type, you're going to apply how you want that fee to be charged. Is it based on a work day? Based on the work hour? Now, the thing to keep in mind here is you can either apply a fee by the job, but keep in mind that a job might actually be a multi-day job. So an admin fee might not necessarily fit for something like this. In other words, maybe there's a mall detail on Saturdays and Sundays. We do it every week. You may choose to schedule that all at once. Well, that would be job number one, even though it's multiple days. So any admin fees would simply be applied to job one. It wouldn't account for the fact that we're working 20 or 30 different days on that particular detail. So for one like that, you may choose to apply it by actual workday. You can choose to apply it based on work hour. So every hour we work for a vendor, there will be a $20 vehicle fee applied. The difference between work hour and job hour is the job may have been scheduled for 8 hours, but may have run long. And we see that all the time in extra duty jobs. We schedule someone for 8 hours, but they're on there for 12. So are you scheduling them for what was the original work times, or are you charging them for the actual work times? For this particular fee, I'll apply it based on $20 per work hour. And below, you will have, once you have created your customer vendors, you'll have the ability to set these up as defaults. So if we work for a particular vendor where there's always an administrative fee, you can go ahead and choose to apply that now. Otherwise, the admin fee just gets added for every job that you're creating as needed. Now, if you do choose to apply these as a default, highlight the fee, click on the vendors that you want to add it as a default, and click Apply Default over to the right. Now, if you choose to have multiple administrative fees, you have another way of applying defaults where you select the vendor, and then you can select which admin fees are defaulted. So really, these two sections really do the same thing. It's just allowing you to do it in different ways. Up top, you would choose the admin fee and mark all of the vendors, or below, choose the vendor and then highlight the admin fees, and then click on the Save button over on the right. Okay, let's close out of our admin fees, and we're going to move on to our job categories. So it's the fourth one down, and job categories are just the types of work that we do. And we would see things like traffic control, security detail, or you might just choose to call them road jobs. That's perfectly fine. So as you create extra duty work, you'll be able to select what type of job category that is. And then that's just information that you can report on. It's information that the people working the jobs might want to see when they're signing up for this type of work. And in much rare cases, but this can happen, if you have a situation where certain types of extra duty jobs are reported on differently, if they're paid out of different accounts, things of that nature, you can actually apply payroll ID numbers based on the type of job that you're working. So to create a new category, click on the New button, enter the category name, and you should have plenty of character length here, about 15 on the code in this case, and the same under the description, if not more. So I'll use this for road job, and we'll click on the Save button, and now it's added to my list of available job categories. Okay, so now would be a great time to pause for any questions with regards to these 4 setup items that we've looked at. And are there any questions on setting up admin fees, job categories, payment terms, or even the very first screen that we looked at, our department profile? Okay. All right, wonderful. So we're going to move on to just a few other setup items. And you'll notice under those main 4 setup items, we have the ability to update ranks, as well as the ability to update squads. So you should have already created your ranks and your squads or groups, as they're referred to within the main scheduling application. But this does allow you to create additional groups or ranks. And this is for anyone who might be using extra duty billing sort of as a standalone application where they're not really using the main scheduling program. So in the event you need to create any groups or ranks, you can do that through here as well. Under Update Skill Sets, skill sets are concepts that we're starting to talk about in the advanced setup classes. And skill sets are typically used for overtime and, in this case, extra duty work. And it's really nothing more than a way of defining skill sets that employees will be assigned to. And these skill sets determine what types of work these folks can do. So here I have 4 different skill sets, And these are used only for overtime. So if I'm going to be hiring overtime for staffing shortage needs, or in this case, extra duty work, you can create a skill set that you will then assign to your employees. So some officers will have the ability to work extra duty jobs, others might not, because maybe they're probationary and they just can't work those jobs just yet. So you can choose to define those skill sets. This would be considered optional. You do not necessarily need to create them. Later on, I'm going to show you how to create lists of employees that you can use so that when you need to fill an extra duty job, you can just run a seniority list or a list based on hours worked. And there you can just define who belongs on the list. And it might just be everyone, who can work department overtime can work an extra duty job. Now, if you feel at this time that you're going to need to create skill sets, just click on the New button over on the right and enter a 5-character code for the skill set and a description. When you're done, click on the Save button, and you'll see a list similar to mine. So the last thing I'll say about this screen is if there's any question about whether or not you need a skill set, my recommendation at this time would just to leave these blank. Don't create them yet. Once you actually see the process for assigning the jobs, you may be able to make a more informed decision on whether or not you're going to need to separate your pool of people based on these types of skill sets. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. After update skill sets, we're going to take a look at update officers. So your employees or officers should already be entered into the system. You did that during your first online schedule build class. But this screen does allow you to make certain changes to that employee's profile. For instance, you can set that employee or officer as a coordinator. For every vendor, you will be able to establish a specific coordinator if you would like. So 99% of the jobs might be managed by one person, but there might be a specific type of job, and grant work might be an example of that, where it is run by someone different. And so you can highlight who that person is, make them a coordinator, and then whenever you assign those types of jobs, that person would receive an email notification, just keeping them notified of what's going on with that particular type of work. Now, if you choose or will need to create skill sets to divide your job pool of people, you can use these drop-down menus to select which skill sets they belong to. Now, over on the top right, a section for pay rates. We'll have an hourly pay rate. And so if you are just charging flat fees or paying your officers flat fees, this is not necessarily as important. But if there's any type of extra duty work where they might be paid time and a half, you'll want to make sure that their pay rates are in here. Now, we are grabbing the hourly pay rate information from the employee's pay info screen. Under extra duty rate, this is not a flat rate. This is a rate that is unique to that employee. In other words, if we're paying our officers $50 for every extra duty job they work, well, that's not their extra duty rate. That rate will be applied to the vendor's profile momentarily. Also within this screen, we have a checkbox marked OK to assign if working. It's a very important checkbox because in a situation where we have an extra duty job and someone is already scheduled to work during those hours, your department may allow that officer to comp out in order to take that job. So it's important that that checkbox is marked so that the system will allow you to assign them the job, and then at a later time or soon after, preferably, the officer would then enter their comp day or comp time for those hours. Now, for good measure, you may just want to check the Contacts tab and make sure that everyone has phone numbers and email addresses. This was also entered during the initial build, but it's a good idea just to make sure that this is in here, especially for those of you who will be using call lists to hire out for this work. Very important. Otherwise, when you're done, click on the Save button and move on to any other employee that you'll need to make a modification to. Make the modifications, click Save, and then close out when you're done. Okay, so the next screen we're going to look at is called Update Overtime Lists. And what we're doing here is we're generating lists of people that can work extra duty jobs. This list will be used so that in the event an extra duty job gets posted on and we have to now call out to see who's willing to work, this will allow us to generate that list in a specific order. To create a list, click on the New button over on the right. Give the list a name, and then click on the names of the employees that belong to the list. It might even be easier to just click on Select All and then unmark the people who cannot work extra duty jobs. When you're done, click on the Save button. Now that you've created a list of employees, we have to establish a sort order. For some of you, that just might be a rotating list. You offer the extra duty job to one person, they accept or decline, they get sent to the bottom. For others, it might be based on hours worked. The person with the least amount of extra duty jobs worked so far this year might be the one who gets offered the detail. we're going to use update overtime selection order to do that. We're going to select the profile we just created, which is the extra duty job list. And you'll see the names of everyone included on it. Now, for a simple rotating list where accepting or declining work sends you to the end, the only thing you need to do is establish a sort order. Now, you can make that sort order match your seniority, or you can enter the numbers manually. So we want to clear the sort order so that it's completely blank. And you can either key in where everyone's current position is. Now, the important thing to keep in mind here is that as soon as you do this, you want to start using the system, because that's the only way that the names will rotate. Okay. If you continue assigning extra duty jobs outside of the system, well, our program won't know the difference. So you may want to save this as one of the last few steps before actually going live with the module. So as I mentioned, you can enter those values manually, or you can apply seniority so that if you're the most senior person, you will be at the very top of the list, at least initially, when you first start using the module. Now, for those that might be using a list based on hours worked, I'm going to refer you to the series of checkboxes over on the left. Here, you're going to mark what types of work get tied to that list. Now, for most extra duty lists based on hours worked, we typically don't look at the amount of regular overtime hours worked, but it is an option. You can certainly choose it. For my example, I'm going to count just extra duty hours. Now, if you are doing this based on extra duty hours, you can choose to use extra duty minimum. What that means is, if you are going to have minimum hours charged to vendors, maybe I just worked for an hour, but the vendor was charged for 4. When it comes time to calculate those hours for my placement on the list, should it just be the 1 hour that I worked, or should it be counted as 4 hours, the minimum? And I'll just use that as my option here. Now, if you are distributing work based on hours, you may want to use the last work date as a tiebreaker. Now, below, you can choose just to count certain types of extra duty categories into that list. Now, I was using an example of grant overtime. You might be using this system or this module to schedule your grant work. That's perfectly fine, because oftentimes grant work is scheduled in a very similar fashion to extra duty jobs. But for the sake of the hours worked in calculating, you might choose not to include that. So that will allow you the flexibility of saying, well, no, only certain job categories count whenever I'm using this specific list. For my purposes here, I will include all extra duty job categories. Now, if you are going to be using a list based on hours worked, I would still recommend establishing a sort order, even if you're mirroring your seniority. Okay. Let's click on the Save button over on the right. And we're done setting up our list. Now, one of the last things we're going to do under the Setup drop-down menu is we're going to set up our phone pad control. This is a small tool. Normally a supervisor would use this when they are generating a list to find someone to work. They're going to navigate through that list using a series of buttons like accept or decline. That will determine what happens to the person on the list. Do they get sent to the bottom? Do they hold their spot possibly? Now I have some of the basics here like an accept, deny, or decline. And you can have up to, about 16, is it? Buttons to choose from. And over to the right of each one that you create, you're going to choose, does that button act as an accept button that now places the person on the job? Does it act as a deny button where that person does not get the job and then gets, then the list moves on to the next name? Or is it excused? Now, to the right of that, you have a checkbox that states whether or not that action means that person will be sent to the end of the list. So let's think of it with an example. If you have a standard rotating list whereby accepting or declining you get sent to the end, you want to make sure that those items are marked properly. If you're doing it based on hours worked, then simply by declining the work doesn't mean you're getting sent to the end. You might actually keep your spot. Even accepting the work may not affect your placement necessarily, because all we're doing is we're adding hours. And if that list is organized by the person with the least amount of hours, you still might be that person the next time the list gets run. After you set up your buttons, click on the Save button, and the way this is going to look, and this is just a brief preview of what's in store for tomorrow, when it comes time to assign a job, you'll have those buttons to choose from. So when you call the first person, if they decline, click on the Deny button, and that's it. So you'll see a little bit more of that tomorrow during the managing extra duty jobs. But the last screen we're going to look at today is found under the Customer drop-down menu, and that's called Update Customer Profile. Now, every vendor you do work for will need a vendor profile. That's going to include their contact information, what we charge them for work, what we pay officers for working jobs for that vendor. So let's start with a brand new one. And I'll click on the New button, and I'll give it a code. This is going to be a J&J Construction. So I'll abbreviate that to JJC. Under name, I can spell that out, and I should have about 25 characters for that. Under the address, we'll also put in the contact information, phone number, and even an email address. And this can be handy if you want to send that person invoices. You don't have to do it by mail anymore. You can send them an email with the invoice. Put the rest of that in there. Now we're going to move right onto the Payment Information tab. Here, you're going to set the flat rate. Now, this is minus any admin fees that might get applied. So that might be $60 an hour. Next, establish the paid officer rate, and that might be $50 an hour. So for this example, you can say that this is a $10 admin fee, but it's rolled into the rate. Next, you're free to enter account numbers if you would like. This is all information you'll be able to extract from the system at some point, but it is optional. Under payment terms, if one does apply, go ahead and choose it from the list of payment terms we created a few steps back. And then choose the payment method. Here we have invoice, escrow, and credit card. So obviously, if you are going to be invoicing the client, choose that. But you do have the ability to set up an escrow account. And you'll be able to enter funds into that escrow account as they become available. Or you can even do it by credit card. Now, you have the option to enter that credit card information in here if you would like. It's not necessary, but it is there. Now, for my new vendor, I'm going to set them up as an invoice client, and when I'm done, we're going to click on the Save button. Now, the information we just entered is default information that can be overwritten at any time. In other words, I set the $60 rate as the default for J&J Construction, but there might be a different rate if, let's say, we're doing something on a holiday. Or maybe if we work over 8 hours or work during certain times of the day, there might be sort of a differential involved. You will be able to modify that manually for each job as it becomes necessary. So we've taken a look at all of the basic setup screens necessary in order for you to take the next step, which is to learn how to create extra duty jobs, how to assign them, how to invoice them, and then how to report on them. So before we close out this morning's session, are there any questions on not just creating vendors, but any of the setup screens we've looked at today? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for attending. And again, that next class is for 9:30 a.m. For tomorrow for the second part of extra duty. Thank you so much, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.